Hi everybody and welcome. Right, as Ian said, what we're going to talk about today is the topic of mums and how they feel and how they act in relation to their children's health, whether that be a sort of cough or cold through to mums who've got children with much more serious conditions. So what we're going to talk about a little bit is what sort of information mums tend to be seeking, the sources that they look for, where they look for that information, and then what we want to sort of really explore is, based on that level of understanding, is how can we use that insight to help build connections with the brand that obviously can ultimately help you engage with your audience. So why are we talking about this? Well, here at Foundry Healthcare, we've been involved in this sector for over 15 years, but what we're going to talk about it today isn't just our opinion. We're firm believers really in going out and talking to consumers, and this webinar today was founded on the basis of some research that we did with mums. We did lots and lots of individual depth interviews with mums of babies and toddlers, some of whom sort of actually had some quite serious childhood illnesses. Others were just suffering from the usual coughs, cold, cut knees type of thing. But we do talk to audiences regularly as part of our Foundry Conversations programme, and as I say, really that coupled with our understanding of the market has formed the basis of what you're going to be listening to this afternoon. So let's kick off and really start to think about what sort of information is it that mums want and what's going on here. Well, mums really are a unique audience in many ways. When we're involved in marketing, obviously all of the time we're talking about, what does our consumer want? What does our consumer need? Well, in the case of mums, they're anticipating and reacting to the needs for somebody else. And actually that somebody else is far more important than she is herself. That bond between mum and her baby or a toddler is the most intense that many of us will ever have. And, so it's really intensifies some of these emotions and some of these impetuses that are going behind engagement with any sort of product or service that they might think. A mum's impetus really is about controlling the world around her child and making it as safe as it possibly can be. And, there are tensions in there that because that's utterly impossible, and those tensions really have as much an impact on mum's emotional well-being as they do on the well-being of a child. Again, as you might imagine, exacerbated when a child is seriously ill. But I think this is summed up by one of our mums. Carol was saying, it's absolutely devastating the first time your baby's skin is broken. Until that point, he's absolutely perfect. And she talked about remembering being heartbroken at that stage. So it really is incredibly intense emotions that we're dealing with here. And as I say, particularly if that condition is severe or unusual. So what's going on here? Well, when we're starting, it's useful, I think, to start to think about states of anxiety, about parental anxiety that's going on here, because you get precursors of lower anxiety in mums, which are really predicated by things like, if a condition is pretty common and pretty short-lived, if we're talking about common ailments like coughs and colds and so on, you don't tend to be that worried. You sort of get to know what's going on. It doesn't perturb you too much. And also, lower anxiety is related to where you are on that parental journey. If you've been through it all, if you've had children before, if you've been pregnant before, you sort of have been there, bought the T-shirt. You get to know what to expect. And again, as the child's age increases, you're less anxious about the experiences that you have. You've got more personal experience, effectively, of what's going on, and that really drives the way in which you seek out information and make decisions. Conversely, there are degrees of higher anxiety that are driven by if your child is more seriously ill, if you've got chronic conditions such as skin problems, serious allergies, things like recurring illnesses, unusual symptoms, or more serious accidents. Obviously, that's going to send the anxiety levels higher up. And you also tend to be more anxious as a parent when it's your first pregnancy, when it's your first child, when it's a new baby. You've got, you've much less of that personal experience that's really going to sort of drive your experience. And that obviously has impacts in terms of brands. You know, one of our mums that we were talking to, you know, put it great, is that, you know, that first time round you just think you need to get absolutely the best of everything to be on the safe side. It's about controlling that environment for that new baby. But with Rachel, I'm just buying the Boots one. It's exactly the same as Calpol. So, you know, it's almost as if this sort of common sense thing kicks in at this stage to, you know, because you've been through it, you get to know sort of the shortcuts. But anxiety, when you start to relate it through to what information mums are seeking and how we as brands can facilitate that, it's quite a useful way of trying to get into this, because a study that was done back in 2008, an academic clinical study, said that mums who report higher baselines of worry about their children's health show greater engagement with an internet-based health intervention. And in fact, that parental worry was a much more powerful predictor than in fact the degree of seriousness of the child's condition. So, you know, that level of anxiety really can't be underestimated when you start to think about how information hungry mums can be in terms of the type of information that they're seeking out. So let's think about those states of lower information needs. So I'm less anxious, I don't particularly need that much information, therefore I spend less time seeking it. You know, I consult fewer sources. You know, it's great, okay, he seems to have persistent cough, what's going on? Right, okay, I might consult a couple of websites, I might talk to a friend who's been through it with her child, but, you know, pretty much it's sort of, I need to seek a specific answer. Once I've got that answer, it's a fairly static information need. And you tend to start to think about making decisions more instinctively. It's like I don't need to really delve into all of the ins and outs of everything. It's sort of, I need some fairly top-line information with these types of things so that I can make that decision quite instinctively. And once that decision's made, there's less questioning of it. You know, it's almost great, okay, that's fine, that we can move on. And brands are very useful here. They can be that shortcut to easier, quicker decisions. It's great, okay, you've already done the hard work. If you've got a certain reputation, if you've got a level of awareness, then fine. You know, yes, it's my first baby. You know, yes, it's I want to sort of do the best for it. What is the best? Great, okay, I understand this brand, I recognize it. That must be the best solution for me. So, you know, it's much more almost of a way of thinking about it as a more sort of commercial decision in a way, in the way that we purchase a lot of brands. But as we saw, that higher level of anxiety leads to a lot more demand from mums in terms of what information they seek. So I need to know more. I need to know information in much more depth. So for these more anxious sort of mums, there's much more time devoted to seeking of that information. They're going to consult more than one source. You know, some of the mums that we were talking about, you know, spent hours and hours and hours really sort of delving through and looking at who said what and you know, seeking out the credentials of individual advice sources. Their information needs tend to be much more dynamic. If you think about it, if you've got a child who's suffering with you know, chronic allergies or you know, conditions like ulcerative colitis or so on, you know, the condition isn't the same day in, day out, and you know, your information needs tend to be much more dynamic in terms of relating to what's happening and what's in front of you on that day. There also, from the research that we've done, there seems to be this tendency to you know, have much less trust in your own judgment. You know, where conditions are more serious, you want to almost have that confidence that, you know, your own instincts are backed up with the opinion of experts. And you're also sort of into a level of continual evaluation of your actions. Now, brands here really, you know, can be very, very useful as part of the support mechanism, but it's useful to think of them also that they're part of a portfolio of options of support, advice and information. And they need to gel as part of that portfolio. They need to be saying the same sort of thing. So when we start to think about mums, particularly with children that have got more chronic needs, what do they need? Well, you know, we can start to think about it in three stages. Firstly, you know, if there's some worry about your child, then, you know, you will quite often go online, you'll quite often talk to people in terms of the search for diagnosis. and that could well involve sort of health professional. It can be quite a short process. It can with one mum we talked to, she was in this stage for about 8 months before she finally finally worked out what in fact was wrong with her son. But once you've got that diagnosis, once you know what condition you're dealing with, you're then into something else, which is the search for that information on that diagnosed condition. What can I do? How can I help? What do we need to do to manage it? What causes it? What's going on? What can I expect? How can I deal with this? So that information need state changes. And then finally you move on to sort of a stage of, great, okay, I understand what I'm doing, I understand how to manage things, but really then it's all about, how can I be supported in my day-to-day management of this? What's going on? What may be happening? Who can I turn to give me new news, something that I might not be aware of? And quite often at this stage, people are looking for support from other people's experiences that they can learn from. And often, this may not just be about, it may not just be about sort of practical and pragmatic support for the child's condition. It's also got a role to play in terms of supporting the mum herself, because, emotionally, they need emotional support. It's heart-wrenching when you've got a child who's ill. They need that emotional support themselves. So it may well be that the search here is as much for her well-being as it is for the child's. And again, that's worth thinking about in terms of the information that we're getting over from a brand perspective. So that's a little bit about what we've learned about the way in which mums sort of engage, what sort of information needs they have. Where do they go? How do they seek information? Well, it's from all over the place. This isn't just a one-stop shop. We've seen really that there's lots and lots and lots of people that mums will engage with in terms of sourcing information, help and advice for their child. And it's really interesting, in fact, talking to mums in the way in which that they take on some of this information from these sources. So just going through, hospitals are interesting. In one sense, they are the experts. It's sort of, absolutely, you've got somebody there with a white coat. However, that is also tempered by the fact that, in recent years, almost a week can't go by without there's some sort of scandal involving the NHS and hospitals and what's gone on. So, what used to be sort of absolute trust is to a degree tempered. So yes, they are the experts, but also their advice, their expertise is also contextualized by information that they've consulted from other sources. When we talk in our nurse panels, it's really quite funny. Nurses quite often talk about label readers and people who've sort of Googled illnesses and things, and and the fact that they've got to, they've got much more informed patients these days than they ever had. Patients who are much more willing to question their professional authority. So similar story really with GPs. Back in sort of 2011, The Guardian ran a survey, and there was an incredible statistic that came out of that, which was that less than 50% of mums answered yes to the question, do you trust your GP to look after your child's health? I mean, that's incredible when you consider that sort of, a couple of generations ago, there was absolutely unswerving trust, and there's no way that you would ever sort of question the authority of somebody that was wearing a white coat. So GPs, again, they're not the absolute font of all knowledge. Their opinion, of course, is sought, but it's contextualized around everything else that other information sources. Pharmacists tends to be fairly sort of straightforward with pharmacists. It tends to be the as you would imagine, the sort of short-term conditions where people will sort of seek the pharmacist's advice in terms of, and it tends to be sort of fairly pragmatic, fairly, does it do this? Can I take that? What's the best one of these for me to buy? They're pretty well trusted, but our mums didn't tend to engage with them on sort of, on these sort of conditions where there was a great deal more information, a higher information need, if you like, or more in-depth support. So it sort of tended to be sort of quite a pragmatic relationship than that they had with pharmacists. Brands then. Well, as we mentioned before, brands could be this shortcut through to trust if they're recognised. And great. Okay, why should Calpol? Everybody knows it. Everybody trusts it. Why the hell not? They can act as that trust. Beyond that, though, it starts to become about the experience that the brand gives me. So it's about really, what does the brand say? How does the brand behave? How does it come over? There are cues that people will look for in brand's website, in the way it talks, in the way it's packaged, and so on and so forth, that allows people to sort of take those cues into the level in which I can trust it. And as you can imagine, anything where they can see through your agenda as being overtly salesy means that, actually you can start to get pretty much discounted from there. Patient associations, really, this is where the trust levels ramped up in terms of the advice and information. They're seen as experts, but they're also seen as being incredibly impartial. They also, interestingly, tend to have websites which are very, very heavily involving of personal stories, and there's lots of these websites have information on children who have gone through and families who've gone through these conditions. They do tend to be very, very personal in their tone. And they're sought out. They're sought out and they're recognised, and they are valued as an independent source of advice and information. And again, they tend to be quite in depth, so they tend to go back. These are sites which tend to be revisited in a way that a lot of brand sites tend to be gone to once for a specific piece of information. And if the brand site isn't offering them a reason to go back, then they don't go back. Whereas these sites, lots and lots of repeat visits. And again, as I'm sure lots of you will be aware, there is value to be had for a brand in associating yourself with some of these societies, with some of these patient trusts, because, in a way, what you are getting, you're piggybacking some of that credibility. And even if you sort of don't take a cynical view from this, it can be invaluable if you have a relationship that allows you to actually benefit from their expertise when you're developing your communications materials, because that tone, that understanding of what people want will filter through, and you've got sort of this great source of information and help really for your own brand development. Family's interesting, of course, but you pick up the phone to your mum, but oftentimes your mum's 200 miles away, and oftentimes actually your mum's advice has been completely discredited by health visitors and HCPs, and the fact that the world has moved on, things aren't exactly the same. So it's interesting, and we spoke to some mums who were sort of, God, I'd never listen to my mum on that, in fact, almost everything that she says I do the exact polar opposite of. But equally, from a brand point of view, it can sometimes be helpful to think that, there are family relationships and, other people that you can talk to and get your brand message over with. And friends is the key one. We talk to our friends about everything. They are really, they're our sounding board, they're our sense check. It's absolutely that peer group is who you turn to. So almost whatever you've learned from any of these other information sources, you're going to filter through your friends, and you're going to listen to what their support says. Which again is why, if your brand can actually engage mums and can be recommended, if you can get people on your side as advocates, you know damn well that they're going to be talking about you, and hopefully talking about you in positive, glowing terms. Which brings us really to online. Because online, of course, the rise of the internet has completely revolutionized the way in which people search for information. So let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail. Well, social media, of course, primarily Facebook when we're talking in this sort of context. And for the mums that we spoke to, it's almost really that virtual extension of the experience that they have when they're talking through to their friends. So yes, of course, what people say, if I know you, then that's great. I'm going to listen to what's sort of said on the Facebook page in the same way that I'd listen to my friends if I'm having a cup of coffee with them. Forums are interesting. Principally, the two that were talked about, you will have no surprise in hearing, are Emma's Diary, principally for first-time mums in pregnancy, and obviously Mumsnet, We've been talking to mums about Mumsnet for some years now, and actually what I think is quite interesting is the way in which opinions have changed over that time. You know, I think when it first came through, it was really sort of the absolute font of all knowledge. For a significant number of the mums that we talked to, though, it is felt to becoming a little bit political, a little bit shouty, a little bit pleased with itself recently. So you know, it's actually feeling like it's becoming a little bit of a turn off for some of our mums. And of course, the thing about forums is that you know, great, of course, there's loads of information, there's loads of people talking on there, but what you get, of course, is conflicting advice. You don't get sort of one lovely sort of prepackaged answer. You get an awful lot of people who are talking and arguing against each other. Again, what's interesting when you sort of sit with mums as they're absorbing this information, they're looking for cues. They're looking for cues in terms of the language of the individual post. You know, does this sound like somebody like me? You know, is this person talking about a situation that I can recognize? So, you know, effectively, there's great ways that we've got of filtering through stuff that we can either believe or not believe on these forums. And it's done, of course, subconsciously, quickly, without us even thinking about it. Retailer sites, great for vouchers, great for money off. Absolutely sign up for them because you know, it's a great sort of pragmatic decision to help save me some money or hopefully get me some freebies. Yes, I might sort of have a look at the information that's on there, but if I'm sort of searching for serious sort of trusted advice, they're probably not really, you know, they're on the second tier rather than the primary tier. Brand sites, again, as we touched on before, it depends on the brand site, of course. You know, what was interesting here is what the information is in there. You know, if I'm just going on there to sort of find out, you know, product usage information, then that's great. I can get that. I can be bounced off there in no time. But if the brand site is giving me really useful content that is speaking directly to my experience and to my opinion, you know, and to my needs, then that becomes very, very much more useful. And the tendency then is for me to be able to go back. The other thing, of course, is it changing? You know, am I going back and seeing the same thing again? You know, is it giving me advice for a parent with eczema? Well, once I've read it once, I've absorbed that information. I then need to move on. My next stage of the journey is I want support and help and new news. If your brand site isn't offering that, then it's missing a trick, and you know, the mums aren't really going to want to engage with it again. Charities and associations, as we've seen before, this is really, you know, massively trusted, and yeah, a lot of time was spent on these sites for the mums that with children that we spoke to with more serious conditions. As we saw in the last slide, they're seen as impartial, they're seen as you know, experts in this area. And the sort of NHS sites, fine, they're okay, but they tend to be a little bit like, you know, they tend to be a little bit top line. So, you know, yeah, sort of okay, but, you know, really I'd rather go and see my doctor if I want to sort of engage with the NHS. So what can we do with this as brand owners and marketeers? How can we use some of this information to start to earn some trust and engage, really? Well, you know, we've come up with you know, some six points, if you like, that that we can start to think about. Firstly, it's about sharing and not shouting. As always in this sort of thing, you know, there are places for being salesy, and it's on your TV ad, or it's on your press ad, or it's on, you know, somewhere where that's the rules of the game. If you're going online, share. It's about educating, it's about advice, it's about support. You know, the content of your communication it's really crucial when you're going through online. It's about knowing, you know, what mums need and delivering that information without the sales spin. It's about recognizing the relevance of your product at every stage of that journey, so that, you know, what information does she need when she's first learnt that child has got a condition? What does she need to know, you know, 3 years down the line when things might be changing? You know, how can you actually be a hub for support for her, whether that's in the way of putting her in touch with other mums with similar experiences through online case studies and testimonials, through to, in the case of one of our clients, who actually runs their own patient support group. And make it dynamic, make it something so that, you know, this sort of online advice and support is as dynamic as her needs are. You know, you're keeping on coming back. So just really a couple of examples of this. This was a pack that we produced for SunSense, which actually got distributed through schools. So again, it's not about sales, it's about actually getting over the message that even in shady, even on shady days in the summertime, kids need to be covered up and need to have sunscreen on because their skin is so delicate. So lots and lots of advice type of materials that went out that helped in that education process, which is what's crucial. It's not selling, it's that education. And again, an education piece that we did for SALT, which was aimed at mums with children who needed stomas, who'd had to have sort of colostomy or ileostomy operations. Again, a massively emotional, massive emotional turmoil for a mum at this stage. What they're after is not sort of, great, okay, our product is 19% more effective than next door's product. It's about helping them through that process, that enormously emotional process of being able to cope with what is this incredibly intrusive condition. And finally, just on this line, a Skin Zone site for Foundry Healthcare, again aiming at kids with eczema. So the language of dealing with eczema on this was specifically about information for parents, information for the children themselves, ways of getting them engaged, ways of actually getting that that sort of compliance information here, which was the big thing in terms of keeping sort of on using emollient even when the kids flare up isn't there. Point 2, make it personal. Tell stories, get involved with people, get the detail out there that makes it compelling, personal and real. If our brand is on its high horse and saying, well, we're the experts in this and we're going to tell you all about our brand and how effective it is, then, why should I care? Make it, mums really, as, all women are, is we're interested in stories, we're interested in other people's experience, we're interested in sharing all of that. So, make that work on your behalf. Recruit users, to do a panel for your product. Genuinely involve users in your new product development and then tell everybody about it. Make that sharing an absolute part of your DNA, and that's going to come over in every part of your brand communications. So, an example of that coming from Tubefast Garments, again, we're in the eczema area here, but the big thing is a child who's itching with eczema. It's not just the itching, it's the fact that they can't get to sleep, and those broken nights for mum and child are absolutely devastating. So here we've used that as that story to be able to get into that insight and that knowledge and that touchstone with parents through the experience of somebody else. And again, this is a real story. This was a few years ago now, but after years of crying herself to sleep, Chloe's just a happy little girl again. That's what you want. It's that sort of that sort of nugget of personal relationship, if you like, that's the passport through to being able to talk about your brand benefits. Point 3, really deepen your understanding of your audience. As always, it's about listening before you talk. Talk to mums, talk to the audience, know what it is that you need. Regular face-to-face is the most reliable way of generating insights, obviously, that can result in a differentiated campaign. Of course, being a researcher, I've recommended that till the cows come home. It isn't always possible, but certainly you should be listening into social media chatter, monitor the conversations that are going on online. There are tools to do this, and I think the danger is for a lot of people, it's easy to be overwhelmed by the volume of this. So you need to evolve a strategy, a resource, even if that's outsourced, to actually be able to mine this information and to understand what you should be listening to, what's the important insights that's coming out of this, rather than just sort of the clutter, if you like, so that you get to what you genuinely need to take notice of, what you need to respond to, what you can sort of safely put on the back burner. But again, an illustration of this understanding has come through. We're talking about skin a lot here, aren't we, today? I hadn't really noticed that. But again, childhood eczema, a product called QV. And one of the insights that came from QV listening to mums was that it's not just about product performance, it's about the fact that for the child, once they've done it, getting their emollient put on before bedtime is horrendous, and they wriggle and they don't want to do it, and it's annoying, and how can we make that process of actually medicating the child easier for the mum? Well, actually, what we did here was create an app. It's a little game where we've got Cool Vince, our polar bear, to, the child has to navigate him and jump him across the icebergs as quickly as possible, collecting the bottles of QV so that he can stop getting itchy. And what it does, it's a distraction device. It sits there, it helps mum. We're on her side. It's the brand demonstrating that it understands mums, it understands, and it's got something practical to help her rather than just a sort of shouty sales message. Fourth point, don't just talk to mums. You're out there, you've got your information. As we've seen before, she isn't just talking to you as a brand, she's talking to a lot of people. So your message needs to be out there, and whether you're putting out information to health care workers, health care professionals, doctors, GPs, nurses, pharmacists, whoever, you've got to be talking the same language. You've got to be putting out a coherent message. And, so it's really almost about translating some of those insights through onto different levels. So here we've got patch wrap, which was an insight about, again, kids with eczema not wanting to wear emollient bandages. Well, actually, this one starts to look like part of their clothes. It just looks like another T-shirt. So it makes it, it preserves their street cred. That insight coming through from information through to mums went through onto healthcare professionals' information, so that when they were talking to mums in turn, they could share this insight. They could share, share this rationale. And again, within pharmacy, a TV campaign that went out for full marks head lice treatment was replicated and, and supported by information that went out to pharmacists. So that, again, you've got this joined up information that's coming through from the brand itself. Point 5, this is a tricky one, for those of us that have worked years and years in pharma, particularly where we're into medicines and we're needing to sort of, we've spent years jumping through regulatory hoops, haven't we? And, suddenly we're not in control of the conversation, we're not in control of what's said. And, I've talked to lots and lots of clients, particularly over recent years, where it's bloody scary out there to be able to sort of think, well, where do I position myself in this world of social media? Well, I think it's fair to say that the answer is not ignoring it, because we simply can't. It isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. So I think it's really about, for whatever your brand, whatever your product, whatever position you're coming from, where do you need to be? It's evolving that social media strategy. And certainly it's about, there are a couple of pointers here that I've got for you, but it's about listening first. You've got to be aware about what the dialogue is before you start to sort of get it weighed in there and engaging. You've got to set for yourself that appropriate level for you to engage at, and what, understand what it is that your brand can bring, that mums want to hear. Remember that it's not a sales arena. It's about engagement on a personal level. It's about not just sort of looking for cues that will allow you to say, well, my brand's 19% better than that. It's looking for cues that will allow you to engage. So, for example, picking up tweets, let's stick with eczema, why not? But, somebody sending a tweet out about, a child having a sleepless night. I'm sorry to hear that, have you tried X, Y, and Z? I'm sorry to hear that. What we're going to do is we're going to sort of send you a quick a link through to our free app that will help your child feel better about himself. Just something that isn't about pushing product. It's about engaging with the moment. That's what social media can do very, very well. And I think absolutely, ultimately, for God's sake, be truthful. Don't hide behind aliases on social media to try and smuggle your message out. You will get found out. And, one thing that you can't afford is for trust to be damaged online, because it spreads like wildfire, and that could possibly do sort of irreparable damage. So, there's some simple rules out there, but, absolutely, you've got to grasp the nettle. And sixth and finally, don't let all of your effort that you've made in, engaging with mums, listening to mums, understanding with mums, honing your message, making sure that your content is fantastic. If, online is crucial. If you can't be found online, then all of that carefully developed content is just not going to go anywhere. It's not going to get consumed. And as we've seen in this arena, mums are not necessarily going to be looking for your brand. They're going to be looking for the answer to a specific problem. So you need need your site to be optimized to those searches. You know, they're going to be looking for those answers. So you need to be making sure that your site is there, it's optimized so that you can be high up on the search engine when these things are typed into Google. We spoke earlier about the need for dynamic content to fulfill the changing needs of parents or children with long-term conditions. But, you know, the fact is with any brand, your content needs to be continually changing to, you know, help establish you as a voice of authority in this area, because that has got a really, really valuable positive impact on your Google rankings. And again, it can help pay dividends in terms of generating engagement and making people want to come to your site time and again. And then finally, and then I will promise, shut up, I promise, think about optimizing your site for mobile. In the last 12 months, the volume of searches online, the volume of web access online on tablet and mobile has more than doubled. It is now over 20% of all interactions that we have with web. And if we think about our audience of mums, you know, they haven't got the luxury of time sitting in front of their desktop at home. They're on the run. They're watching little Johnny go swimming. They're in the car delivering Eleanor to her ballet class. You know, that mobile is where they're at, that's where they're engaging. And sites that are miniaturized versions of their PC selves are likely to just be sort of surfed well past. You've got to be you know, relevant for the device that people are searching from. That's, you know, absolutely more and more important. So let's just recap 6 pointers that hopefully will give you a little bit of pause for thought or a little bit of cues for what perhaps you can work into your development of your brand. Don't make it salesy. Share, don't shout. Make it personal. Really, really get involved with your audience. Use their stories, use their experiences in whatever creative way that you can, because that really is going to pay dividends. That's going to come through. It's going to be believable. It's going to make you believable and credible. Part and parcel of that is about deepening your understanding of your audience so that you know that you're talking in their terms, in their language, in their terminology, you know, speaking direct to their needs rather than, you know, broadcasting as a brand. Obviously, that's a, you know, key point for any of us, really. Don't just talk to mums. Think about who else she's going to be talking to and how you can get them to broadcast your message in the same way. Don't be scared of social media. Make it work for you. Really, you know, hold your nose and jump right in and see what you can do to help build your brand through that medium. And then finally, don't forget to be findable on Google. So hopefully that has given you a little bit of food for thought. As always, it's a hell of a lot to cover in half an hour, and if there's any questions that you have for us that have arisen out of any of this, we'd love to hear from you. Do please get in touch. We'd love to talk to you. As Ian said at the start of this, unfortunately I've got a meeting that I'm having to rush into, so we're going to hold questions on this. But if anybody does have any questions, please do get in touch with us. I'm more than happy to have a chat to you. We'd love to talk. And if you've enjoyed this webinar, please do have a look on our website. We do them regularly, and hopefully we'd like to have your company again. Many thanks, and have a nice afternoon.